This is the interactive tour of Ellis Island. Welcome to Ellis Island. More than 12 million immigrants made their first stop in America at the Ellis Island Immigration Station between 1892 and 1954. In fact, more than 40% of Americans can trace their family history back to Ellis Island. We're going to follow in the immigrants' footsteps by taking this tour. You'll hear first-hand stories told by people who came through Ellis Island, see historical photographs and films, read fascinating facts, and discover the central role the station played in the story of American immigration. Let's start the tour. Okay, so we're at the first stop, which is the Passage. Most of the immigrants who came to America through Ellis Island were from Eastern and Southern Europe. In many cases, they came to escape the poverty and religious intolerance that existed in small towns in countries such as Italy, Poland, and Russia. They began their journey to America on foot, horseback, or train. Many trekked hundreds of miles across Europe to get to a seaport. When they arrived at the coast, they boarded a steamship. The trip across the Atlantic Ocean lasted 1 to 2 weeks. The ships divided passengers by wealth and class. First and second class passengers stayed in staterooms and cabins, but most people were in third class, called steerage. Steerage was a large open space at the bottom of the ship. As many as 3,000 people crowded the ships. They often came from different countries, spoke different languages, and belonged to different religions. Feel free to pause this video and look through the pictures. Some of the questions on the handout are related. The questions and the answers come from these pictures, so I suggest if you can't find an answer to flip through these pictures. Remember, you should be pausing this video to go back and answer the questions for the first stop before you move on to the second stop. Second stop is the arrival. The trip across the Atlantic Ocean was rough. The ships were crowded and dirty, so most passengers were very tired when they arrived in New York Harbor. One of the first things they saw was the Statue of Liberty, which has stood on its own island in the harbor since 1886. People would cheer when they spotted this famous symbol of America. Some would weep with joy as the ship passed by it. Health officers would board the ship in the harbor and look for signs of diseases. If the ship passed their inspection, doctors then would check the health of first and second class passengers on the ship. These lucky few were processed quickly and could leave the ship when it docked at New York City. But third class passengers often would wait for hours or days until a smaller ferry boat took them to Ellis Island for immigration processing. Just a reminder to pause the video and go and answer the questions for this section, which is the second stop, the arrival. You can also take time and flip through the different sections. You're allowed to watch the audio, listen to the audio and watch this video if you would like. Third stop, the Ellis Island baggage room. Officers wearing uniforms greeted the ferry boat as it docked at Ellis Island. They shouted and motioned to the passengers to walk down the gangplank to the main building. The officers passed out numbered identity tags. The people who did not speak English were often unsure what the officers were saying. The commotion was overwhelming. Men, women, and children struggled off the boat, carrying trunks, clothes sacks, and suitcases. They followed one another along the path and entered the imposing red brick building. Wearing their number tags, the immigrants entered the baggage room on the building's ground floor. They left their precious belongings here until the inspection was done. Next, the immigrants went upstairs to the registry room. That is where the medical and legal inspections took place. Just another reminder to pause and answer the questions for the third stop. Don't forget to look through the photos. Stop number 4 is to the stairs to the registry room. The immigration process began on the winding stairs that led to the registry room. Doctors stood on the second floor and watched each person. They looked for people who had trouble walking or breathing or showed signs of other health problems. Pause this video and answer 4 stop questions, which is on the back of your handout. The 5th stop was to the registry room. The registry room was nicknamed the Great Hall because it is so big. The large rectangular room is 200 feet long and 102 feet wide. Many immigrants had never seen such a large indoor space. The waiting area in the Great Hall had long metal rails that helped maintain an orderly line as people went through the medical and legal inspections. Wooden benches were added in 1903. The noise in this room could be intense. The sounds of thousands of voices bounced off the vaulted ceilings. Officials in the Great Hall decided whether each person could enter the country right away or whether that person's case required further review. From 1903 to 1914, immigrants were checked for trachoma, which is a contagious eye disease. Doctors use a tool called a button hook to lift a person's eyelid to look for the disease. The button hook was a well-known and feared part of the immigration process. People with trachoma were often sent back to their home countries. Pause the video and answer the questions for stop number 5. The 6th stop is the medical exam. The doctors at Ellis Island developed a system to identify immigrants who needed medical attention. The first test was a 6-second physical. A uniformed doctor looked for any signs of illness or contagious diseases. The doctor noted whether the immigrants limped or were short of breath, if their eyes were red, if they acted disturbed or seemed otherwise abnormal. If someone was considered a risk to the public health, his or her clothes were marked by a piece of chalk with an identifying letter. An X denoted insanity. A P denoted pulmonary, which is lung problems. Immigrants who were marked were taken out of the line and kept for further inspection. Immigrants who passed the 6-second exam continued through the maze of metal rails towards the far end of the hall for the legal inspection. Don't forget to look through the photos for this one, because one of the answers is in one of these pictures. The 7th stop is the legal inspection. Each arriving steamship's crew gave officials at Ellis Island a list of names of the passengers on board. The manifest, as this list was called, had the name and a description of each passenger. One by one, the passengers were called forward to speak, with the uniformed inspector seated on a tall stool behind a high desk. Interpreters helped the immigrants communicate. 29 questions were asked of every immigrant. They included, where were you born? Are you married? What is your occupation, which means job? Have you ever been convicted of a crime? How much money do you have? What is your destination? An immigrant could be detained for further inquiry if his or her answer differed from the answers listed on the manifest. The last stop is the 8th stop, called detainees. For most people, Ellis Island was the Isle of Hope, but for the unfortunate few who failed the health or legal inspections, it was the Isle of Tears. Legal detainees lived in a dormitory room on the 3rd floor. They might wait a few days or even a month. Then their case would be reviewed in the hearing room. People who were detained for medical reasons were cared for at the island's hospital or kept in quarantine. Some were treated for weeks or even months, Eventually, a board of special inquiry would review an individual's medical report and decide whether to allow him into the United States or to send him back. Okay, at this point, you should be stopping to answer the questions for the 8th stop. If you need to go back and re-listen to different parts, you may do so. If you have any questions, make sure you ask for help.